What's up, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the CBB Yapper. It's honestly insane how fast this season has flown by, but we are finally approaching the best part of the year here. For today's episode, we're going to start with me taking some victory laps here and breaking down some of the games that I had provided on Thursday's episode. Then I'm going to go over a little bit of a bubble watch segment and just provide some teams that have a lot of work to do here in the last week of the regular season. And of course, we'll end it with some more games to watch between now and Thursday's episode. So without further ado, let's get into it. The first game I had pointed out here on this weekend slate was this matchup between Michigan State and Purdue on Thursday night. We haven't really gotten many top matchups on Thursday nights throughout the year, but we finally got one and it absolutely delivered here. This one was just a heavyweight battle between two of the best teams in the Big Ten, not named Michigan, and despite me pointing out Braden Smith and Jeremy Fears as the matchup to watch in this one, this was really just a complete team effort from both teams here. Only one player put up 15 points or more in this one, and that was Carson Cooper, who put up 15 points on the dot. It was also just a tale of two halves as well. Purdue came out and kind of looked like they might run away with this one here in Michigan State, and then Michigan State responded immediately in the second half and kind of controlled it from there on. Cohen Carr had a really good game in this one with his usual insanely athletic playmaking. I've said this before on this podcast, and I'm sure many other college basketball fans share this same sentiment, but he is just one of the most fun players to watch in the entire nation. He just absolutely jumps out of the building, and if you're standing under the rim when he's around, you better look out. This was just one of those games that, unfortunately, someone does have to lose, but it shouldn't really hurt either team's resume here. They are both elite teams, and I think they're both borderline contenders as well, so this is just not something to really hang your head over as a Purdue fan. I thought it was just a really impressive win for Michigan State in a game that went down to the last possession. Michigan State takes on Indiana this afternoon and Rutgers on Thursday before they get another rematch versus that Michigan team who is playing like one of the best teams in the country. Purdue has a fairly average stretch to end the season here. They get a tough Buckeyes team that will have a lot to play for here this afternoon, a weak Northwestern team on Wednesday, and then they end the season versus a very dangerous Wisconsin team. Moving on to the Friday night matchup I had pointed out here was this supposed to be heavyweight matchup between Michigan and Illinois. However, it seems like Michigan was not very happy after taking that loss to my Blue Devils last weekend. The Minnesota game was not very good. They started out pretty shaky in that one, but by the second half, they were able to pull that one off fairly easily by the end. However, in this one, they just completely routed the Illini. I was talking very highly of Illinois coming into this one. I didn't think that they would necessarily pull the win off here, but I definitely thought that they were going to at least give Michigan a closer game in this one. Michigan was just super impressive the entire game. They let Illinois get out to a little bit of a lead in the first 10 minutes, but then they had enough of that and immediately responded and dominated the last 30 minutes of the game here. The biggest standout to me was how good Michigan's front court was in this one. The three bigs, Mara, Lendeborg, and Johnson, combined for 54 points, 23 rebounds, and 4 blocks between the three of them. Just a really impressive game for America's second best front court, only behind the Duke Blue Devils. Johnson, I thought, was extremely impressive on Friday night. Returning home to Illinois, where he transferred from, he certainly put the Illini on notice. I really am starting to like his game a lot and think that he's going to be a player that's going to be a sneaky good contributor in the NBA for a good team. His game is just something that I think is always going to be sought at that level. The Wolverines, however, did take a very big blow to their backcourt here in this one. LJ Kayson has been confirmed to be ruled out of the year with a torn ACL. That's just obviously absolutely brutal news for this Wolverines team who's looking to cut down the nets this year. He is an awesome backup point guard, and I think that it could even be argued that he should have been starting over Elliot Cadeau, and I think multiple people have made that argument this year as well. I'm hoping for a speedy recovery for him, but it certainly is going to be a big blow to Michigan and their chances to cut down the nets. That kid is a great guard with a great feel for the game, and he will certainly be missed coming off the bench for Michigan here. For Illinois, I had said that Wagler would need to have a great game for them to win this one, and he did not play his best, that's for sure. He had 23 points, but it was on a pretty inefficient shooting night. He shot 7 of 17 from the field, and with only 4 assists, he just did not do enough to get the Illinois offense going here. I still think this Illinois team is very good, and that this game reflects a little bit more on Michigan's muscle and how good they are. But I am really starting to question whether anyone is on this Michigan, Duke, and Arizona level. The only team that I think could possibly sneak into that category, I will talk about a little bit later. But as of right now, I just think those three are really in a different category right now. Michigan ends its season against Michigan State, as we mentioned before, but they also get the Hawkeyes on Thursday night, which should be another rout for them. Illinois gets a well-needed break here. They get Maryland and Oregon to end the season, which should be some lighter games for them, but they definitely cannot afford another loss before heading into the Big Ten tournament here next week. Moving on to that loaded Saturday slate we had pointed out on Thursday, I, of course, circled this Duke and Virginia game, and I really don't think there's a more impressive team in the nation right now other than Duke. I think up until last week, you could have said Michigan, but after that matchup, I think that title rightfully belongs to the Blue Devils here. I've just been getting increasingly more excited for this team as the season has gone on, and boy are they hitting their stride right at the right time here. They returned home for a really tough matchup versus UVA after being on the road for a week, in DC against Michigan, and then to South Bend for Notre Dame. However, they returned home and were more than ready for this one. After a lot of college basketball experts predicted the Blue Devils taking a loss here to the Hoos, they came in and kicked the crap out of Virginia. This one was never a contest, with Virginia never holding a lead at any point, and the Isaiah Evans show was on full display in this one, lighting it up from the field, putting up 19 points, shooting 5 of 9 from deep, which was just an incredibly impressive game from him. He is just so streaky, and when he catches fire, he is so much fun to watch. It's been fun to watch everybody's question kind of melt away here about who is Duke's second option. People are starting to get a lot more worried about this Duke team and worried that they're going to do the damn thing, and I am here for it. One thing I had pointed out on Thursday's episode was the matchup between Cam Boozer and DeRitter, and Cam absolutely backed me up here. I had said Cam would be too much for Ritter to handle, and he just absolutely dominated him in this one. Just another extremely impressive win from the Blue Devils in another historic season. While I don't think that this team is as talented as last year's team, they are elite in their own right. The other thing is, this team doesn't have to play the teams that were in last year's field. Shocking, I know, but they have to play the teams that are in front of them. And I don't think that this field as a whole is nearly as good as last year's team, and certainly the top 4 teams are not nearly as good as last year's either. So I am obviously going to be rocking with my Blue Devils here for the rest of the year to win the chip, but I think they are quickly becoming the national heavy favorites. Duke ends the season with their Tobacco Road rivals here, taking on NC State in Raleigh with a quick turnaround from Saturday on Monday, and end the season, of course, with the ugly blue from down the road. For Virginia, they get a weak Wake Forest team who has really struggled all year, and then a chance to right a wrong from earlier this year in their rival against Virginia Tech. Up next, I had pointed out this Arizona and Kansas game, which took place on Saturday afternoon. Now, I unfortunately didn't get to watch this game as much as I was hoping and didn't get to focus on it that much, but like a couple of the games that were on this Saturday slate, this one was just a complete blowout. Kansas barely led at all in this one, and even though they tried to make it a game at the end of the first half, Arizona immediately bounced back and was pretty much on cruise control for the entire second half here. In my preview, I had talked about the matchup between Badunga and Pete potentially coming back in this one, and that being the biggest key for Arizona to win this one. Pete had struggled a lot in the first game and let Badunga pretty much bully him all game. However, this one was a much different ball game here. He and Krivas really shut down Badunga, holding him to only 2 points and 1 of 5 from the floor. Pete also put up 12, 7, and 5 on a decent shooting clip, while Krivas dominated as well, putting up a double-double with 2 blocks. Burries was awesome as well here. He added in 20 points of his own, 12 boards and 5 assists, all while shooting 60% from the field and 50% from deep. Just a really impressive game from the freshman duo and Krivas here in this one. Kansas, on the other hand, was pretty bad all around. We talked about Badunga earlier here, but Peterson was pretty bad for his standard as well. He did put up 24, but it almost took him as many shots to do so, going 8 of 21 from the field with only 3 assists. Only 3 Jayhawks put up double digits with no one else scoring more than 4 points in this one. For Kansas, they are just not playing their best ball here recently. Even though they have that huge win over Houston from a week ago, I think that can really be more attributed to Allen Fieldhouse at this point. At home this year, they are 15-2 and shoot almost 49% from the field and 36% from deep. However, on the road, it's a much different story. They are 6-6, shoot a measly 43% from the field, and this just seems to be something that might plague the Jayhawks here in the Big 12 tournament and March Madness if they can't figure out how to play better away from home. They go on the road here again to face Arizona State on Tuesday night, but return home for their last home game and a rivalry game between them and Kansas State, on Saturday. For Arizona, this was just another super impressive game to add on to another really impressive year for them. After sliding a bit here in the last couple of weeks, the Wildcats are right back up in the same tier as Michigan and Duke, I think. This team is hitting their stride here too, right at the right time, and will be a scary team to face here in March. They get another home game, but it's a tough one here. They take on the Cyclones, who will definitely be pissed off after dropping that tough one to the top-in-list Red Raiders yesterday. And then they end the year in Boulder, taking on Colorado on Saturday. Up next, I had pointed out this Alabama and Tennessee game, and this game was ruined by, yet again, another terrible injury. The player I had pointed out last episode as the player to watch, and someone that I think has just been playing really good ball recently, unfortunately got hurt and only played 11 minutes in this one. Early on in the first half, Nate Ament got his leg rolled up on and was sent to the locker room and never returned. For a Tennessee team that had really been bouncing back here recently, this is just a huge loss here. Then, to top it all off, they lose on a game winner by Phylon with 25 seconds left. Had Ament been able to play the full game in this one, I do think that we'd be talking a completely different outcome here. With Ament on the floor, and honestly, even without him on the floor, Tennessee looked like the better team for 90% of this game. But that is the brutality and beauty of college basketball. If you don't play a full 40 minutes, you can lose in a game where you seem to have dominated the entire time. The story in this one, though, was the guards. Phylon and Wrightsell were absolutely electric for Bama. They combined for 48 points and shot a combined 65% from the field as well. They are just a really tough duo as a backcourt to handle, and if they're both going, they are going to be a really tough out in March here. Jacoby Gillespie was awesome for the Vols as well, I thought, despite the loss. He didn't shoot very well from the field, but just given the offensive load that he had to carry in this one, I think he gets a pass here. He put up 26 points with 7 assists and an insane 8 steals as well. He was just all over the floor for the Vols here and just had a really good game trying to will Tennessee to a win, but just came up short at the end. This was just a really impressive win for Bama, but I do still think that if Ament would have been able to play, they would have been beaten pretty easily. However, that is all hypotheticals as they get another W in the win column all the same here. I thought the most impressive thing for Bama in this win was their defense. To win this one, they had to get stops as they needed to come back from a deficit late in the game, and they did just that. For a team that hasn't been good on defense all year and a team that I have really been harping on how bad their defense is, I'll definitely applaud them for this effort. They end the year with 2 very losable games if they're not careful here. They take on Georgia here on Tuesday, and then they go back home for their big rivals in Auburn for rivalry weekend. And Auburn is definitely a team that is going to need to do some work here this week, and we'll certainly be looking at that game for a big resume booster there. For Tennessee, I'm not really sure what the word on Ament is yet. I haven't seen anything come across my phone yet, but we should get some news on that soon. If he's out for the season, though, that's just a death wish for this Vols team. He's been steadily improving as the year has progressed here, and I really hope we get to see him in March. This freshman class is just too good for us to not get to see guys like him in the tournament. Their tournament hopes aren't necessarily in danger here, but they can't really afford any more losses here. They go on the road to take on the Gamecocks here on Tuesday, and then they get a very good Vanderbilt team in their respective rivalry matchup for this weekend. Moving down the Saturday slate here, I had pointed out this Villanova and St. John's game as a game that I was really excited for, but I was extremely disappointed here. This game seemed to be pretty much a carryover effect from the beatdown that the Johnnies took last week to UConn. It was just a little rude of them to do this to the Wildcats, but they must have needed it to let out a little bit of frustration here. Nova led for a very short time in this one and just got smoked from there on out. This is really the only game that I think I got completely wrong this week. I expected a lot more out of this Nova team, and they just did not show up pretty much at all. I said on Thursday that they needed their guard trio to show up in this one, and they did the opposite. I'm not sure I would even say a single one of them had a decent game. They combined for 8 of 26 from the field and 4 of 13 from deep among the three of them. Just a really horrible night from a backcourt that I've been talking highly of all year. St. John's, on the other hand, was absolutely lights out. They just absolutely poured it on Villanova, shooting over 50% from both the field and from three, and out-rebounded Nova by 14 as well. Just an all-around dominant game here from them, and they clearly answered the call after that terrible second half against UConn. Ejiofor had an insane night as well, putting up a triple-double with 16, 12, and 10, and even added 3 blocks as well while shooting 50% from the field. Just an absolute monster game from the forward here after he really struggled against UConn. St. John's has been one of the teams that I have been high on all year, and aside from the UConn game recently, they have really been proving me right here. Nova, on the other hand, has been a team that I have also been high on and had been playing great here recently until they ran into the other contenders in the Big East. Back-to-back bad performances against the caliber of teams that they'll see in March has me questioning how good this Wildcats team is here. However, I do still believe in their backcourt, and I refuse to believe that they'll continue to play like this. They end the year with 2 easy games here that they'll need to bounce back in. They go to DePaul on Tuesday before coming back home versus a sneaky Xavier team. St. John's, on the other hand, is in a similar boat. With 2 average games left, they stay at home for Georgetown on Tuesday night, but then they travel to Seton Hall for a really dangerous game. The Pirates just gave UConn a bit of a scare on senior night here, and it will be interesting to see if the Pirates can get a win versus a top team, which they desperately need. Moving on to probably my favorite matchup here to talk about today is this Arkansas and Florida game that took place last night, and I had been hearing a lot before this game. Just a lot of crazy things. A lot of people were telling me that this Arkansas team was the best team in the SEC and that they were really close to Florida and going to give Florida a real scare here on Saturday night. However, I spent this entire game laughing the entire time. The talk around the Razorbacks being the best SEC team pretty quickly faded overnight here. I had been saying for the entire year, actually, that this Arkansas team is not even in the same stratosphere as this Florida Gators team, and boy was I right. The Gators absolutely waxed Arkansas, and aside from the first 8 minutes or so here, Florida dominated them the entire night, and by dominated, I mean they dominated them in all aspects of the game. They out-rebounded Arkansas by 20 and absolutely suffocated them on defense. Now, I'm sure a lot of the box score watchers are going to go here and say, Cam, well, they put up 77 points. How did Florida suffocate them? They also took 75 shots. In comparison, let's take a look at what Florida did. Florida had 111 points. Do you want to take a guess at how many shots they put up? 69. They took 6 less shots and put up 34 more points. That is called suffocation on defense. Now, I do think that does have a little bit to do with the Florida Gators game plan and them getting to the free throw line 32 times, but that is exactly what I said they were going to do on Thursday's episode. They are a team that is heavy loaded in the front court, and they are going to rely on their paint presence and outside shooting to beat teams, and that is exactly what Todd Golden did in this one. Their front court, once again, dominated and were just way too much for Arkansas here. They combined for over half of Florida's rebounds and 51 of their total points as well. This team is just super impressive, and as of right now, I think they're my Final Four team as well. I currently think that this Florida team is right on the cusp of being right in that elite contender category with the other three obvious ones in Arizona, Michigan, and Duke. They get a weak Mississippi State team here on Tuesday before they go to Kentucky for a game that could be a good one in Rupp Arena, but I expect another blowout there for Florida. Arkansas has to bounce back here at home against Texas, and then they get another road game to end the season at Missouri. The last game I had pointed out on this Saturday slate was this Gonzaga and St. Mary's game, which took place in the nightcap here. And this one was just a really fun game that seems to be a pretty fitting end to a great rivalry here. Unfortunately, with Gonzaga leaving for the Pac-12 after this year, it is the last time we are going to see these two rivals face off against each other, at least in regular season conference play. With this win, the Gales earned a share of the West Coast Conference regular season title, which makes them and Gonzaga both the 1 and 2 seed heading into the WCC tournament here. Hopefully, this is setting us up for one last look at these two facing off against each other in the WCC chip, which would just be an awesome end to the rivalry here with an auto bid being on the line, but both teams are still an at-large bid regardless. In the first half of this one, it looked like Gonzaga was going to run away with it here, getting out to a 10-point lead kind of early, but then St. Mary's battled back and brought it within 7 by halftime. After the break, however, it was all the Gales as they just torched Gonzaga in the second half. They won the second half by 18 points, holding Gonzaga to 23 and under 60 points total on the game, and Mikey Lewis was an absolute stud for St. Mary's, putting up 31 points and shooting 67% from deep as well. Just a really all-around impressive performance from St. Mary's here, but especially defensively. I had said on Thursday that whoever could establish their defense was going to win this one, as they're both top 20 defensive teams according to KenPom, and it was definitely St. Mary's last night. Both of their regular seasons did end with this one here, and the next time we'll see them is in the WCC tournament coming up this week, which we will absolutely be tuning into. Of course, with today being the first day of March, I thought it might be appropriate to bring up some of the teams here on the bubble that need some big wins here in the next couple of weeks to look out for. First up, I wanted to talk about a team that I have been talking down on all year. Seton Hall has been pretty mid in my eyes the entire year. They just have not really figured it out much, but after keeping that one close against UConn, they still have a real shot to make the tournament here. Of course, they will definitely need a win here against St. John's and cannot lose to anyone other than the top 3 in the Big East tournament, but they're still on the bubble. You learn the most about a team when their back's up against the wall, and the Pirates are running out of time to fight here. Out in the SEC, there's really only 2 teams that I think should be on the bubble, and one that I have no clue how they're even being considered here. Texas A&M is a familiar name that I have talked about and talked highly of about a month ago. However, they have just been horrible since then and dropped another tough game to a bubble team here on Saturday. They really have to win this upcoming game here versus Kentucky if they want to get back in the tournament field. The other team that I was talking about in the SEC that's a bubble team is this Texas team who just took down the Aggies this weekend. If they would have been able to take down Florida the other day, they would firmly be in the tournament field, I believe. However, that collapse really hurt their chances here, and certainly right now they're right on the edge of being out. Of course, they can obviously still win the SEC tournament, but I don't see that happening at all. A much more realistic scenario for them is them getting a huge road win here against Arkansas on Wednesday night and then avoiding a slip-up against Oklahoma. If they can do that, I think they will be in, barring a bad loss in the SEC tournament. Auburn is the other team that I think is on the bubble on most sites, and I really don't get why. In my eyes, even if Miami, Ohio doesn't win the MAC tournament, they deserve to be in over this Tigers team firmly. Moving on to the Big Ten, I think Indiana is on the bubble here, but their chances are really looking bleak. They get Michigan State today, like we talked about earlier, Minnesota on Wednesday, and then they end with another bubble team at Ohio State. Ohio State, on the other hand, is in a pretty similar boat as well with the same record. I think the Buckeyes are most likely out here, but I'm really hoping they do just enough so we can see Bruce Thornton in March because I really think he deserves it. They get Purdue this afternoon, which I don't think is a very winnable game for them. Penn State on Wednesday, and then the bubble showdown against Indiana next weekend, like we discussed earlier. In the ACC, I really think that there's only two bubble teams, and that is Cal and Virginia Tech. The others, I think, should all get in pretty firmly that are in the conversation. Cal really does not have much of a chance to even improve their resume here, though, however. They get Georgia Tech on Wednesday, which is just a really bad team, and then end the year in Wake Forest, who is just another really bad team. I think they need to go 2-0 in that stretch and most likely need to win at least a game in the ACC tournament to sneak in here. Virginia Tech, on the other hand, gets a much better opportunity to improve their resume with a game they can't lose against Boston College, and then they get a big game against their rivals, the Hoos, next Saturday. In the Big 12, this is the last place that I really see any bubble teams here. I think most of them will get in just because that conference is insane, but TCU is a team that I think is right there on the bubble with a chance to move up this week. They get Texas Tech on Tuesday, which if they can pull that off, I think that will propel them pretty high here. I think the problem is that they get another game to end the year that will really be tough with another team that's on the bubble in the same conference in Cincinnati. The Bearcats have really come alive here in the past month and are certainly pushing for an at-large bid as well. They get BYU on Tuesday night, making for two great opportunities here left on their schedule to get some pretty huge wins and possibly sneak into the tournament here. And of course, that takes us into the next week and some of the biggest games to watch here. Starting on Big Monday, we have two games here that I think are at the very least interesting. We'll start with Duke versus NC State here, and in this one, I fully expect Duke to win this one pretty convincingly. Looking at how bad the Wolfpack have been playing here recently and how bad they've been beaten by teams like UNC and Virginia, I really don't see a path to success in this one for the Wolfpack. Duke just has to pretty much show up, and I think they should win this one in another convincing fashion. However, going into Raleigh is always tough, so they definitely need to be ready here on Monday. Other than that, I really don't have much of a preview for this game. The one thing I did want to mention as a Duke fan that I have been seeing go around social media here in the last couple days is the last 3 times Duke won a national championship, it was in Indianapolis and immediately followed a loss in Raleigh to NC State. Now, I'm not really a huge believer in trends and things like that, but if that's what it takes for Duke to cut down the nets and win a championship this year, I am all in. And, of course, if we lose, I am definitely going to be using that as a coping method. The other game I have circled here on Big Monday is this Arizona and Iowa State game, and this game is really interesting to me. Iowa State just dropped a really bad one to a top-and-list Texas Tech team yesterday that they really could not afford to lose. After I put them in my contender tier here last week, they have really fell flat on their face here the past week. They got beat by an undermanned BYU team last weekend and then another loss to an injured Texas Tech team here yesterday. Granted, that Red Raiders team is not a joke, and for the meantime, they are playing incredible ball. But for a team like the Cyclones, those are the types of games that they cannot be losing. Arizona, on the other hand, is back to their early season form. They have been on an absolute tear here recently and will need to carry this momentum here into this one. If Iowa State wants a chance to win this one, they have to figure out the paint. I have talked about this being a problem all year for Iowa State, but they still just do not have a paint presence, especially on defense. I am fully expecting both Krivas and Pete to eat in this one on Monday night, as I still just do not think that this Cyclones team has figured it out in the paint, and my belief is really starting to fade here for them. However, a win here for Iowa State will definitely erase a lot of the doubt being placed on them, and I'm excited to see them with an opportunity to get a huge win here. Moving on to Tuesday night here, I have UNC versus Clemson. This was another night that I kind of had a couple games that I circled, but ended up deciding on UNC Clemson here. Without Caleb Wilson, this UNC team has really held firm here. Despite getting obliterated by that NC State team, they have really impressed me here in the last couple of weeks with some of the wins that they've rattled off, most notably that Louisville win. This is just another huge test for the Tar Heels without Caleb Wilson. He has apparently been making great progress in his injury recovery, but it doesn't seem like he's going to get back for this one yet. It looks like they're aiming to bring him back against Duke, of course, but they will need to manage one more game without him in the meantime. After being touted as the second best team in the ACC for pretty much a majority of the year, Clemson is another team that has really fallen flat on their face here. They're currently tied for fourth in the conference standings, and I think that they're still in the tournament field pretty firmly, but that's only barring a bad collapse here. If they end the year with 3 straight losses, those hopes could be in very serious jeopardy here. For UNC, they need their guards to show up again here. Clemson is a solid team who plays good defense and tries to slow the game down. If I'm Hubert Davis, I'm trying to make the Tigers get into a running match with me. If they do, I think that's going to favor the Tar Heels and their play style tremendously. Next up, it's another bit of a more interesting game and kind of a bubble watch here, but that's going to be between BYU and Cincinnati on Tuesday night. This game, like I said, is extremely interesting and will have tons of implications on March Madness bids and seeding here. BYU is a team that should be in, but Cincinnati is a team that I think just wants it more right now. After Wes Miller issued that apology to the Bearcats fans after that terrible loss early on in the year, he has quickly turned it around this season and rattled off a huge win against Kansas last weekend. For Cincinnati, their chances are getting pretty bleak here, but a win on Tuesday night will certainly make the committee have a lot tougher of a job here when seeding them. If this team can win win these last 2 games, and a game or 2 in the Big 12, I think they have a real shot at getting an at-large bid here. For BYU, they really can't afford a loss in this one, and I expect Debansa to play like it. Their seeding has just continued to tumble here after the loss of Saunders, and I know it stinks, but they really have to just get past it. Now is not the time to feel sorry for yourselves, and I don't think that's necessarily this team's makeup. I think they will be ready to play in this one, but Cincy at home playing for their lives is going to be a really, really tough game and a really scary sight for BYU. Moving on, I have this Nebraska and UCLA game circled here, and this is just a game between 2 teams that I think should both be in the tournament. Nebraska is very obviously a tournament team and most likely a top 5 seed here, but UCLA is right on the cusp of that. Looking at the latest bracketology reports, they seem to be hovering around one of the last 8 teams in here, some putting them a little bit above, some putting them a little bit below. However, a win here would significantly boost that status. They have been another team that has been up and down all year, but is finally playing much better ball here as the season's coming to an end. I really liked their roster coming into the year, but they just never were really able to put it all together this year. However, they still have a great opportunity to put some people on notice here, and honestly, with their backs against the wall, I kind of like UCLA in this one. Nebraska is certainly the better team, but like I mentioned earlier with Seton Hall, it's just a really tough spot to be in. Playing a team that's fighting for its life is usually a battle, and Nebraska is going to need to be prepared to play 40 full minutes of great basketball in this one to take this one home. Of course, for UCLA, they just need to make sure no one is raising their voice at Mick Cronin, and I think they should be okay in this one. Moving down to the last game I have pointed out between today's episode and Thursday's episode is this Texas and Arkansas game on Wednesday night. This is just another bubble team in Texas with a huge game this week that is absolutely must win for them. With them blowing that game versus Florida last week, they really blew a huge opportunity to be firmly in the tournament field right now. However, luckily for them, they get a great opportunity to bounce back here with another great team in Arkansas. My segment about the Florida and Arkansas game may make it seem like I don't like this Razorbacks team, but I absolutely do. The only problem I had with Arkansas was people just clearly not watching the SEC, and I am just so glad that that was proved right here this weekend. However, Arkansas is certainly very good, and Acuff is among one of the best guards in the nation, if not the best guard in the nation. This will definitely be a tough one here for Texas, but I do think that they can absolutely pull it off. I think if they want to do so, they're going to need a big game from Voka Titus in this one. If they can get him going and have him slow down Brazil in this one, I do think that the Longhorns have a real shot here. However, that's not really what I'm expecting to happen in this one, but a win here would really make things interesting going into the conference tournament here, and with Selection Sunday coming up in 2 weeks, could be a huge bolster to Texas's resume. However, that is all I have for today's episode. We are quickly approaching the best time of the year here, and I could not be more excited. I appreciate everyone who decided to tune in to today's episode, and if you enjoyed, go ahead and leave a like, subscribe, and join us back on Sundays and Thursdays for new episodes.